17 apex biology specimens drowned in their own lungs. The human was busy bleeding on her paperwork. The green haze swirled through the chamber. It was thick enough to rot steel. Heavy armored forms hit the reinforced deck, vibrating the floor underfoot. Cadence Vance did not look at them. She shifted her stance. She brought her index finger to her lips. She squeezed a tiny laceration and let out a frustrated sigh. The environmental monitors screamed that her open wound was ingesting pure death. She only cared about the sting of the paper cut. I'll be honest. What the sensors showed that day broke everything we thought we knew about life. 41 seconds earlier, the trial began. Proctor Vakes stood at the active control console on the assessment deck. He adjusted his optical lenses and locked the airtight seals on Isolation Terrarium Aegis 7. He pulled up the baseline logs. He cleared the previous test data from the main drive. The human exchange student stood in the center of the room below. She wore a standard Earth Expeditionary Forces uniform. She did not wear a helmet. She held a physical mission dossier made of pressed pulp. Vakes frowned. He flagged the item on his digital slate. Ink on pressed pulp was a primitive, highly flammable vulnerability in a sterile zone. It offended his strict sense of order. He tapped the glass screen. He logged a minor demerit on her permanent file. He keyed the comm link to warn her, then stopped himself. The trial rules strictly forbade outside interference. He closed the comm channel. He tapped the engagement icon to record the inevitable failure of the human in the galaxy's most lethal biological trial. He initiated the sequence. The heavy ceiling vents snapped open. A toxic emerald glow filled the chamber. The necrosis spores deployed in a thick, rolling cloud. The Vector cadets reacted instantly. Their mandibles clicked in focused discipline. They activated their atmospheric shields. They drew their training weapons and formed a tight defensive ring around the center. Vakes monitored the pheromone uptake levels on his primary screen. He typed a series of commands to track their vital decay. He assigned a tracking trace to each cadet. The chemical readouts dictated a precise timeline for failure. The terrarium broke anything that entered it. It was just a matter of when. The cloud reached the floor. It wrapped around the cadets' boots. It climbed their armored legs. The shields whined under the pressure. Vakes watched the power levels drop on his secondary monitor. He nodded. The system performed perfectly. Then the spores hit critical lethality. The Vari hazmat seals breached. The elite cadets broke formation. The squad leader dropped his weapon. He clawed at his breathing tube. The others followed. They fell to their knees. They slammed their fists against the reinforced glass. They began to choke. Cadence shifted her stance. She did not reach for a weapon. She did not run for the airlock. She turned a page in her file. She frowned at the text. Her hand slipped on the stiff mission dossier. The sharp edge of the binding sliced across her index finger. She winced. She dropped her hand. A bright red bead of blood welled up from the skin. The biological breach flashed red on the main screen. An alarm chimed in Vakes' earpiece. He keyed the environmental sensors to lock onto the open wound. He expected an immediate catastrophic reaction. 3,000 parts per million of necrosis toxin rushed straight into her bloodstream. Vakes gripped the edge of his metal console. He waited for her systemic collapse. He watched the diagnostic bar expecting massive organ failure. The progress bar stalled. It froze. It flashed a stark white void. No decay. No stress. No reaction. Vakes froze. He punched a new command into the secondary visual feed. He zoomed the camera in on the human's face. She was still standing. She was not choking. He ran a bypass trace on her heart rate. It remained flat and steady. He rerouted the scan to check her neurological pathways. Nothing. The toxin entered her body and simply vanished from the sensors. The machine had to be failing. Vakes refused to believe the physical reality unfolding below him. He assumed she possessed some pre-filed anomaly that the system had failed to register. His mandibles clicked frantically against his collar. He broke testing protocol. He slammed his hands onto the manual override keys. He bypassed the safety locks. He rerouted the primary filters to purge the sensor intakes. He diverted power from the observation deck lighting to reboot the chemical analyzers. The deck plunged into dim emergency lighting. Sparks showered from the overhead conduit. He typed a forced diagnostic command. He bypassed the firewall. He needed a reading. The readouts demanded a corpse. The monitor showed only a mild annoyance. He pounded his fist against the console. He sent a ping to the Deep Space Archive. He requested any known biological countermeasure that matched her profile. The archive returned an empty file. He canceled the request. He tried to manually calibrate the air pressure. The console rejected his input. The system was blind. Inside the terrarium, the alien warriors fell. Armored knees slammed into the grating. The squad leader collapsed onto his back. He kicked twice. He went completely still. The others dropped around him in a synchronized wave of defeat. Their armor clattered against the metal floor. Cadence ignored the collapsing bodies. She pinched her bleeding finger. She sulked. She wiped the tiny smear of blood on the edge of her uniform jacket. She blew on the cut. The deadliest atmosphere in the galaxy swirled directly into her face. She breathed it in. She exhaled a normal breath. She turned the page of her dossier with her good hand. She inspected the paper cut a second time. A void cannot be poisoned, can only be mildly inconvenienced. The error codes multiplied on the screen. Vakes trusted the chemical sensors with his life. That was his first mistake. The contradictory data poured into the mainframe. The system tried to calculate survival odds for a biology that did not register damage. It created an infinite loop. The logic loop threatened to crash the entire assessment grid. Sirens blared across the assessment deck. Red lights spun along the ceiling. Vakes had to stop the cascade failure before it wiped the station's memory core. He abandoned the keyboard. He ripped a hardware cable from the side of the terminal to sever the network link. Sparks burned his gloves. He reached for the heavy analog master switch under the desk. He slammed it down. He shut down the chemical sensors entirely. The screens went black. He pulled his backup slate from his belt. He forced the testing terminal to accept a new manual classification just to keep the local grid online. He typed the words himself. Null reactant void. The trial clock hit 0. The extraction vents activated. The heavy fans engaged with a deep rumble. The green haze cleared from the chamber in a rush of filtered air. The heavy airlock cycled with a loud hiss. The metal doors slid apart. Emergency medical teams rushed past the threshold. They carried heavy trauma kits. They scrambled across the deck to retrieve the fallen cadets. They deployed stasis fields over the dying aliens. They shouted commands in their native tongue. Cadence stepped out of the chamber. Her uniform remained pristine. She walked right past the panicked medics. She did not look back at the terrarium. She climbed the metal stairs. Her boots clanked against the grating. She marched directly up to the assessment deck. She stopped in front of Vakes's ruined console. The smoke from the severed cable drifted between them. She held up her hand. She pointed to her index finger. "Do you have a bandage?" she asked. Vakes did not answer. He slowly opened a drawer. He pulled out a small adhesive strip. He handed it across the desk. She peeled the backing off. She wrapped it around her cut. She nodded her thanks. Vakes looked at the human. He looked at the paper dossier she held in her other hand. She did not conquer the atmosphere. She simply did not acknowledge it. The blood on the pulp remained fiercely red. The system that analyzed it remained irreparably broken.